Rain dripped steadily from the eaves of Hawthorne Manor, a decaying retirement home perched on the edge of the misty woods. Inside, most residents were already asleep, lost in the slow drift of forgetfulness. But one room remained lit, a small, cluttered space where Harold Jennings, a once vibrant man, now shrouded in loneliness, stared blankly at the peeling wallpaper. Somewhere outside, a low growl pierced the night. A pair of amber eyes reflected the dim hall light, and a mud-slicked Pitbull stood at the threshold, shaking water from its coat as if it had waited decades for this very moment. If the rain-soaked world outside can hide secrets, maybe tonight would uncover one. Rain dripped steadily from the eaves of Hawthorne Manor, each drop a small percussion on the warped wood and tin roofing. The manor sat on the edge of the forest, where the trees grew so close that even the faintest streetlight couldn't penetrate the darkness. Inside, most of the residents were asleep, curled beneath thin blankets, faces slack with years of neglect, faces that had long since forgotten the warmth of attention. But in one dimly lit room, a single lamp flickered, casting shadows across peeling wallpaper. Harold Jennings, a man who had once laughed and loved freely, now hunched over in a chair, staring at a cracked wall as if it held some hidden message. The stillness was broken by a low, wet growl. Harold's head jerked toward the sound. At first, he thought it was the wind or a trick of memory, but the growl came again, deliberate, measured. Amber eyes glinted in the hall light. A Pitbull, coated with mud and rain, stood at the doorway, shaking water from its body. Its gaze didn't waver. It was steady, almost human in intensity, as if it had waited decades to find this exact moment, this exact person. Harold's throat tightened. His voice, rusty with disuse, croaked, "Who's there?" The dog padded forward without hesitation. Harold's pulse quickened. He hadn't felt this sensation in years. Not since his wife had passed, not since the world had slowly erased him into silence. The dog approached cautiously, tail low but wagging, a rhythm that matched the heartbeat fluttering in Harold's chest. He raised a hand, trembling, and the Pitbull nudged it gently with a wet nose. Cold mud transferred onto his knuckles, but the warmth of the connection was undeniable. "Why are you here?" he whispered, though he half knew it wasn't a question the dog could answer. The Pitbull's ears flicked at the creak of the old building, alert to every sound. The soft hum of the heater, the distant clatter of dishes in the kitchen, the faint whisper of footsteps in the hall. Harold felt an old instinct awaken inside him, a protective awareness he had thought long dead. Somehow, this creature knew him, or at least recognized the emptiness in his room, and had chosen to fill it. Hours passed like minutes. Harold fed the dog scraps of bread he had tucked away, speaking in low murmurs about things he hadn't said aloud in years. He told stories of his youth, running through the woods behind the manor, the river where he learned to swim, the friends who had vanished like shadows. The dog listened, tilting its head, occasionally letting out a low sigh, almost human in its sympathy. Harold realized with a pang that this was the first living thing to truly witness his grief since his wife died. The door creaked. A shadow fell across the room. Marla, the assistant director, stepped inside, frowning at the sight. Her uniform was neat, pressed, but her eyes were tired, hardened by years of enforcing rules she barely believed in herself. "Harold." Her voice had the brittle edge of authority, but it trembled ever so slightly with uncertainty. "It's late. Lights out." Harold instinctively moved a hand toward the dog. He's mine," he said, voice firmer than he expected. Marla's eyebrows shot up, calculating, almost predatory in her precision. "A dog? Here? You know the rules." Her gaze shifted, briefly scanning the hall and the other rooms, before returning to Harold. There was a flicker there, something buried beneath the practiced professionalism, something careful, restrained, wary. Harold didn't trust it. He'd learned, over decades of quiet observation, that people like Marla held secrets, and the tiniest slip could change everything. The dog growled low in its throat, a protective warning, and Marla paused. Harold's pulse hit his ribs like a drum. "He's not going anywhere," Harold said firmly, the weight of loneliness finally giving him courage. Marla's shoulders tightened. "Fine, just for tonight. But don't get any ideas." Her words were clipped, but her eyes lingered on the dog longer than necessary, a subtle calculation at play. She left, leaving the door ajar. The pit bull lifted its head as she exited, ears pricked, aware of every shift in the shadows. Harold felt a lump in his throat and sank back into his chair. For the first time in years, he wasn't invisible. For the first time, someone or something cared. The rain fell harder, drumming a relentless rhythm against the roof. Outside, the forest seemed alive, each branch and leaf moving with a language Harold couldn't understand, a language the Pitbull clearly did. Occasionally, distant howls echoed from the woods, a haunting symphony that made Harold shiver. He realized, with both fear and fascination, that the dog was attuned to things he had long since stopped noticing. The subtle shifts in air, the unspoken presence of another life nearby, the hints of secrets buried in the manor's long, decaying corridors. Harold drifted into a restless sleep, hands still resting on the dog's back. Dreams came in fragmented flashes. The forest of his childhood, laughter that had been buried with the past, a shadowy figure watching him from a distance. Always the Pitbull was there, guiding him, protecting him, reminding him that even in a world designed to erase people like him, there was still someone or something that remembered. The morning light arrived slowly, seeping through rain-streaked windows. Harold awoke to find the dog still at his side, vigilant and patient. The forest beyond the manor shimmered in mist, the outline of trees blurred and shifting. For the first time in years, Harold felt a fragile sense of hope. He stood, the dog following like a silent sentinel. Together, they moved through the hall, past peeling paint and worn linoleum, past the rooms that had become cages of memory and neglect. As breakfast began in the dining hall, Harold noticed the subtle changes in the staff. Some eyes lingered too long on the dog. Whispers floated along the edges of conversation, even among the routine of trays and clinking cutlery. He felt an undercurrent of tension, a subtle awareness that something had shifted in the manor. Later that morning, Marla appeared again, ostensibly to check on him. "Harold," she said, voice neutral, "you need to understand the rules here. Pets are complicated. They bring risk." Harold looked at her, then at the pit bull at his feet, and something in him hardened. "This isn't a pet," he said. "He's not leaving." Marla's eyes flickered. For a moment, the brittle mask slipped, revealing something darker, something that hinted at knowledge she shouldn't have. Harold didn't ask, but the unease settled in his chest like lead. He realized that the presence of the dog wasn't just a comfort. It was a disruption, a challenge to the fragile order Marla maintained. Over the next few days, the bond between Harold and the pit bull deepened. The dog followed him through the corridors, keeping a silent watch over his every step. Staff whispered behind hands, some sympathetic, some wary. Harold noticed strange things, too. Doors left ajar that shouldn't be. Faint sound of walls. The way Marla's gaze lingered a moment too long on certain rooms. There was a subtle sense of history here, of secrets buried beneath linoleum and wallpaper, and Harold began to suspect that the manor had its own shadows, shadows older and darker than loneliness. One evening, as the storm returned, Harold found a small, yellowed envelope slipped under his door. Inside was a note written in a careful, unfamiliar hand. "Trust him, but trust carefully. Some things want to be forgotten for a reason." He stared at the words, the weight of them pressing into his chest. The pit bull nudged his hand as if sensing his confusion and fear. Harold realized he had stepped into something far larger than his own grief, something that tied his fate to the manor, the staff, and the shadowy woods beyond. He wasn't just lonely anymore. He was chosen, drawn into a quiet, creeping danger he could feel but not yet define. That night, Harold lay awake in the dim glow of his lamp. The pit bull curled at his feet, vigilant. He thought of the note, of Marla's lingering gaze, of the whispers and creaks that haunted the manor. For the first time in decades, he felt alive in a way that was both exhilarating and terrifying. He had a companion. He had a secret. And he had a choice. Retreat into the shadows of his life, or step fully into the unfolding mystery that arrived at his door, muddy paws first. Somewhere in the manor, a window rattled against the storm. Somewhere in the forest, a presence watched, and Harold, with a pit bull at his side, knew that the quiet life he had led for so long was over. Something had begun, and there was no turning back. The next morning, the rain had stopped, leaving Hawthorne Manor drenched in a brittle gray light. Puddles reflected the twisted shapes of the trees, and the forest beyond the grounds seemed to pulse with a secret rhythm. Harold Jennings had not slept well. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant call from the other residents felt magnified, loaded with unseen intent. The Pitbull, whom he had started calling Rook, followed him obediently, scanning the hallways, tail low but alert. Harold wasn't sure if the unease came from the manor itself or from Marla, whose calculated attentiveness seemed to grow sharper with every passing hour. Her presence was never overtly threatening, but the way she watched him, from the corner of her eye, timing her footsteps to intersect with his own, made Harold feel like a subject under constant observation. Rook seemed to sense it too, growling softly whenever Marla's shadow crossed the hallway, even when she spoke nothing but neutral words. Breakfast was a subdued affair. Plates clinked, forks scraped, and the low murmur of elderly voices echoed faintly against the worn linoleum floors. Harold noticed Marla whispering to a nurse, her lips barely moving, her expression unreadable. He caught fragments. He's aware needs monitoring unusual behavior. The words didn't make sense in the context of the manor's routine, yet they carried an undeniable weight, as if the staff feared more than just broken bones and memory lapses. "Morning, Harold," said an older nurse, gently pressing a tray of oatmeal toward him. Her eyes flicked to Rook, then back at him. "He's quiet, isn't he? Loyal, like he knows exactly who he belongs to." Harold nodded, the bond between him and Rook deepening with each glance. "He's protective," Harold said, and the nurse gave a faint smile. She seemed to understand the unspoken language between man and dog, a language forged in solitude and survival. Once breakfast was over, Harold took Rook for a walk outside, along the gravel path that ran the perimeter of the manor. The forest loomed close, dark and unyielding, its shadows spilling across the path. He noticed subtle details he'd ignored before, broken fences, footprints that weren't human, and the faint, sweet tang of decay on the air. Rook's ears twitched constantly, nostrils flaring as he sniffed the wind. Harold realized that the dog was more than protective. He was attuned to things Harold could not see, sensing threats and anomalies in a way that felt almost supernatural. As they walked, Harold's mind returned to the envelope from the night before. Trust him, but trust carefully. Some things want to be forgotten for a reason. He had asked himself repeatedly, who wrote this, and what did they mean? The sound of distant voices made him stiffen. 2 men were approaching, dressed in worn jackets that smelled faintly of smoke and oil. They stopped near the edge of the forest, speaking in low tones, their faces partially obscured by shadows. Rook tensed, growling low in warning. Harold didn't recognize them. "You see him too?" one man muttered, scanning the trees. His voice carried a note of fear. Harold froze. Rook growled again, stepping slightly ahead of him, protective. It was the first time Harold realized that the dog wasn't merely reacting to danger. It anticipated it. The men exchanged a glance, then disappeared back in the forest, their movements deliberate and careful. Harold felt a shiver creep down his spine. Someone was watching the manor, and somehow it was tied to the secrets that had lain dormant for decades. Back inside, Marla waited. Her expression was neutral, but her eyes were sharp, calculating. "You've been out long enough," she said, though the note of warning in her tone was unmistakable. "We have rules here, Harold. Rules to keep everyone safe." Harold bristled. "Safe from what?" "From me." Marla hesitated, her eyes flicking to the hall, then back. "You don't understand yet, but some things are better left undisturbed." Her voice was calm, almost soothing, but Harold could feel the unspoken threat beneath it. For the rest of the day, the manor seemed alive with whispered tension. Residents stared from their doorways, faces slack yet aware. Harold noticed patterns in the staff's movements. Certain doors avoided, certain rooms locked at odd hours. Small glances exchanged when they thought he wasn't looking. Even the walls seemed to hold secrets. Later, as he explored the east wing, Harold discovered a small, neglected library. Dust choked the shelves, and the air smelled of mildew and forgotten paper. He ran his fingers over the spines, pausing at one book that seemed deliberately misplaced, a leather-bound journal with no title. Flipping it open, he found pages filled with names, dates, and cryptic annotations. Do not disturb the pit. The past will bite. A chill ran down his spine. He realized that the manor's history was far darker than he had imagined, and somehow Rook knew it. The dog sniffed at the journal, growled low, then backed away, as if warning Harold not to read further. That evening, Harold returned to his room, journal in hand. Rook lay on the floor, ears alert, tail flicking. As he sat in his chair, Marla appeared again, quietly closing the door behind her. "Harold," she said softly, but there was steel beneath the softness. "You need to be careful. Some people, some things, aren't what they seem." Harold looked at her, searching for meaning. "What do you mean?" Marla's eyes softened briefly, then hardened again. "There are histories here. Dangerous histories. The manor, it keeps them hidden, but not forever. You're lucky he found you." She nodded toward Rook. "That dog. He has instincts humans don't understand. Trust him, but trust carefully." The words mirrored the envelope from the night before. Harold's unease deepened. He realized he was caught between two guardians, a dog who could sense threats beyond human perception, and a woman whose loyalties were opaque, her morality gray and shifting. Night fell, and the storm returned, fiercer than before. Thunder rolled over the manor, rattling windows and shaking the foundations. Harold and Rook sat by the window, listening. And then, faint but distinct, came the sound of footsteps outside, careful, deliberate, pacing just beyond the tree line. Rook growled, low and resonant, hackles raised. Harold's pulse quickened. He peered through the rain-streaked glass. Shapes moved in the shadows, figures cloaked in the darkness of the forest. One paused, as if aware of being observed, then retreated. Something was coming. Something that had been waiting for decades. Something tied to the manor, to its secrets, and now to Harold. The night stretched long, every second a drawn-out echo of suspense. Harold slept little, Rook never leaving his side. The dog's presence was both comforting and frightening. A reminder that danger lurked, but also that he was not entirely alone. In the early hours, a soft knock came at his door. Harold froze. Rook growled low, ears pinned. The knocking persisted, light, hesitant, almost pleading. Harold's heart raced as he opened the door to find an envelope slid beneath it. The paper was yellowed, as if decades old, yet crisp enough to carry words clearly written. "They are coming. The pit will not forgive. Follow him and survive." Harold's hands shook as he read. The writing matched no hand, he knew, yet the warning carried authority, urgency, and fear. Rook nudged him, urging him to move, to prepare. By dawn, Harold understood something fundamental. Hawthorne Manor was alive in ways he could not yet comprehend. It was not just a building. It was a cage, a sentinel, a place where the past and present collided. And he, with Rook at his side, had been chosen to confront it. He didn't yet know the full extent of the danger. He didn't know who had sent the notes, or why the forest seemed alive with unseen watchers. But he knew this. Survival depended on trust, in himself, in Rook, and perhaps in Marla, whose motives remained a tightrope of ambiguity. The storm cleared, leaving a sharp, brittle morning. The manor's exterior glistened wetly, reflecting a muted sun that promised clarity, but delivered none. Harold and Rook ventured outside again, moving along the perimeter with new purpose. Every snap of a branch, every shadow, every gust of wind felt like a coded message. Harold realized he was no longer merely a resident. He was a participant in something far larger, something that had been waiting for the right moment and the right companion to unfold. As they rounded the corner near the old caretaker's shed, Harold froze. Footprints led from the woods directly to the manor, muddy and wide, as though something large had passed recently. Rook growled, standing rigid, ears forward. A faint, metallic tang lingered in the air, a scent Harold recognized from years long past. Blood. The realization hit like ice. The danger was immediate. Whatever had been stirring in the shadows of Hawthorne Manor was awake, and now it was close. Harold turned to Rook, seeing not just a companion, but guardian, A sentinel, a living link to survival in a place that had long since forgotten mercy. Together, they stepped back into the hall, senses sharpened, hearts racing. The manor held its secrets tightly. But Harold had begun to pry, and once the first layer peeled away, there would be no turning back. The forest was restless that morning, mist curling like smoke around the skeletal trunks of the trees. Hawthorne Manor, normally a quiet, decaying sentinel on the edge of the woods, seemed tense, alive with anticipation. Harold Jennings moved cautiously along the gravel path with Rook at his side. Every nerve in his body was taut. Every shadow felt like it harbored unseen eyes. He had learned, over the past days, that the manor's history was woven into every brick, every floorboard, every whisper of wind through the branches. And now he knew that the danger was no longer lurking. It was here. Footsteps crunched in the wet gravel ahead. Rook growled low, a warning that vibrated in Harold's chest. He crouched, pressing himself against the moss-covered wall of the manor, watching two figures emerge from the fog. One was a man, tall, broad-shouldered, and masked with a scarf that hid most of his face. The other was a younger woman, her movements deliberate, almost predatory. They paused at the edge of the forest, scanning the grounds, then vanished again into the mist. Harold's pulse pounded. The journal, the notes, Marla's cryptic warnings, they all pointed to something far more dangerous than a neglected manor or forgotten past. Someone or something had been waiting, observing, perhaps even orchestrating events for decades. And now they were ready to act. Rook's hackles rose, and Harold felt a surge of gratitude and fear. This dog was no ordinary animal. He was sentinel, guide, and companion. Every instinct Rook displayed seemed calibrated to survival, as if he could see into the layers of threat hidden from human perception. Harold reached for him, whispering, "Stay close. We're not alone." Inside the manor, Marla watched from a high window, her face pale, eyes sharp. For the first time, Harold noticed a flicker of fear beneath her carefully maintained composure. She had always been morally ambiguous, a gatekeeper whose loyalties were hard to read. Now, though, it seemed she had no choice but to confront the consequences of what she had kept hidden. Harold slipped into the east wing, Rook moving silently at his side. The journal he had found days before was tucked under his arm, pages filled with cryptic warnings and references to the pit. He couldn't make sense of everything yet, but he understood one thing. The manor was a labyrinth of secrets, and the forest beyond was a trap designed to keep those secrets hidden. As they moved, faint sounds reached them, whispers in the hallways, the shuffle of unseen feet, the occasional metallic scrape that made Harold's stomach knot. It was clear the manor was not abandoned in its vigilance. It had defenders, observers, mechanisms long forgotten by anyone who lived there. Yet Rook navigated effortlessly, pausing at doors that seemed ordinary but, when pushed open, revealed hidden alcoves, discarded relics, and signs of long-forgotten rituals. The first confrontation came without warning. In the old caretaker's shed, shadows shifted. Harold and Rook entered cautiously, only to find a masked man from earlier crouched near the far wall. His scarf fell away as he turned, revealing a scarred face and eyes filled with a mixture of anger and desperation. "You shouldn't be here," the man said, voice low, rasping. "This place is not for the living." Harold's hand went to the journal. Why? Why all the secrecy? Who are you protecting?" The man's lips twisted in a bitter smile. "Protecting? No, we're containing. This manor holds more than memories. It holds something that cannot be allowed to leave. And now that you've come, there's no going back." Rook growled, stepping between Harold and the man. The Pitbull's stance was unwavering, protective, almost commanding. Harold realized, in a shiver of understanding, that Rook was not just a companion, but a guardian against whatever forces had been imprisoned here for decades. Suddenly, a noise came from above. Marla stepped down the stairs, her face pale, eyes wide. "Harold," she said, voice trembling, "I didn't want this to happen, but it's out now. You have to trust him. Trust Rook. Trust no one else." Harold's mind raced. Marla, once a figure of control and authority, now appeared vulnerable, a woman forced to reveal truths she had long kept buried. He sensed her fear, her moral conflict. She had helped maintain the manor's secrets. Yet now, she seemed willing to assist him, albeit reluctantly. The tension snapped when the second figure, the young woman, emerged from the shadows, brandishing a long, curved blade. Her movements were fluid, predatory. She lunged at Harold, but Rook intercepted instantly, teeth snapping, growls reverberating through the shed. Harold grabbed the journal, swinging it instinctively to create distance, while Rook engaged the attacker with precision and ferocity that defied reason. The fight was chaotic. Harold could hear bones cracking, hear the sharp intake of breath, the guttural sounds of struggle. Yet Rook remained steady, unwavering, a perfect blend of instinct and loyalty. Harold realized in that moment that the dog was more than guardian. He was a key to survival. Without him, Harold would not last a minute against the shadows that had waited so long. After what felt like hours, but was only minutes, the young woman retreated, dragging herself into the mist outside. The masked man slumped against the wall, gasping. "This isn't over," he warned, eyes flicking to Rook. "He will return. The pit, it always returns." Harold's chest heaved, his hands trembling. He looked down at Rook, who now sat calmly, tail wagging faintly, as if nothing had happened. Gratitude surged through him, mixed with awe. The dog had saved him, and in doing so, revealed the depth of the manor's unseen dangers. Marla approached cautiously. "There are rooms, places," she said softly, "that even I have never entered. The manor is old, older than it looks, and some things were buried to protect everyone, including you. You're lucky the dog found you." Harold nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He had been chosen, drawn into a network of danger, secrecy, and moral ambiguity that few could survive. And yet, with Rook at his side, he felt a fragile, unshakable resolve. He would uncover the manor's secrets. He would survive, and he would protect those who could not protect themselves. The next days were tense, filled with quiet vigilance. Harold explored deeper, guided by Rook, uncovering hidden passages and secret chambers that held artifacts, letters, and clues hinting at decades of suppressed horrors. He found evidence of past residents who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances, hints of rituals designed to contain something malevolent, and signs that the manor itself seemed aware of intruders, shifting in ways that defied explanation. Throughout it all, Marla remained a morally gray shadow, sometimes helpful, sometimes frustratingly opaque. She provided critical guidance but withheld information, forcing Harold to question her motives constantly. It was a delicate dance of trust and suspicion, and Harold understood that any misstep could be fatal. The climax arrived one stormy night. The masked man returned, not alone this time, bringing others whose faces were obscured by hoods and fear. They moved silently through the forest, circling the manor with an intent that was palpable. Harold and Rook prepared, barricading doors and mapping escape routes. Marla, surprisingly, stood by his side, her hands shaking but her resolve firm. When the attackers breached the perimeter, Rook was the first line of defense, moving with precision and power that stunned Harold. He fought alongside the dog, using everything he had learned about the manor's hidden passages to stay one step ahead. The storm outside mirrored the chaos inside, lightning illuminating the hallways in staccato flashes, thunder shaking the foundations. In the final confrontation, secrets were revealed. The masked man was a descendant of the manor's original caretakers, obsessed with containing the pit, a dark force linked to the manor's past. Marla had been complicit in maintaining the secrecy, torn between duty and morality. And Rook, seemingly ordinary, was in fact a protector bred to sense and confront the darkness, an instinctual sentinel. The fight ended not with victory, but with understanding. The intruders fled, leaving Harold, Marla, and Rook to confront the manor's secrets on their own terms. They realized that some dangers could not be destroyed, only managed, contained, and respected. The manor remained haunted, alive with history and hidden truths, but Harold and Rook had survived, bonded in ways that transcended words. In the quiet aftermath, Harold stood in the morning light with Rook at his side. Marla approached, her expression softening, the moral ambiguity she carried now tempered by relief and trust. "You've changed things," she said quietly. "The manor, Maybe it could be different now. Harold nodded, watching Rook's amber eyes glint in the sunlight. He realized that life in Hawthorne Manor would never be normal, but it was alive, dangerous, and shared. For the first time in decades, he felt seen, needed, and, strangely, at peace. As he walked through the halls, patting Rook's head, Harold understood a profound truth. Survival was no longer about isolation, but connection. The dog, the morally complex allies, even the haunted manor itself, all had shaped him, tested him, and ultimately allowed him to reclaim a fragment of life he thought lost forever. And in the quiet moments, as the sun glimmered across rain-slicked windows, Harold whispered softly to Rook, "We made it. Together." The Pitbull wagged his tail, eyes steady, as if to say, "Always."